Hey, this is Mark Altman. Have you been looking for the ultimate Star Trek podcast? Well, check out Inglorious Treksperts as we take you, well, as we boldly go, where no one has gone before, exploring the incredible history of Star Trek and beyond.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are, if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw and get reacquainted with some old classics. So now, join us for the 4:30 movie.
This week, it's Hail to the Chiefs Week. Hello, I'm Mark Altman, and welcome to the 4:30 movie. So, Hail to the Chiefs Week. What's that? Well, we're honoring Election Day, and I hope you've all gone out and are, if you haven't filed your absentee ballots, that you've gotten out to the ballot box and voted. It's never been more important than now. So I want to introduce you to our regular panels along with our special guest. Once again, we have Ashley E. Miller. Welcome back, Ashley.
Thank you, Mark.
We also have writer-producer Steve Melching.
Hello there.
Or Steven, as he goes by professionally, as I'm often reminded.
So you don't get confused by that weird nickname, Steve.
And of course, Steve-O.
I mean, I've written, it's weird because like half of my screen credits say Steve and half of them say Steven. I don't know.
That can be a real problem on IMDb.
Spielberg has the same issue. All those movies he did as Steve Spielberg. Yeah.
And last but not least, our regular panelists are Richard Dawson, our Charles Nelson Riley, our concept designer, the man who designed our fantastic for our Rich Little 4:30 movie swag, concept designer and brilliant artist, Mr. Daren Dochterman.
Let's see if he's up there, Daren Dochterman!
Services.
Pass. And then we're lucky to be joined this week by actress and the producer of Galactic Cast and Comic Book Orange, Miss Casey McKinnon.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We got somebody else voting at the ballot box this week as we pick our 5.
Except that I'm Canadian.
Oh, so you can't
Oh,
vote.
no.
I can't vote.
You can't
Well,
nominate.
there's nothing that says she can't vote in the 4:30 movie.
That's right.
Yes.
I guess that's
But
true.
I'm here to encourage all you Americans to get out there and vote.
There you go. Excellent. Well, you need to get, a green card or something because
Oh,
we
no, I
need
haven't.
all the votes
Yeah.
we can get here.
Can you sponsor people who want to immigrate to Canada?
You know what? I'm also encouraging Americans to stay in
Yes.
America because America needs you.
Yes.
Yeah, now more than ever. So, okay, well, this is going to be a fun week for Election Day. We are going to talk about movies that either are about presidents, feature presidents, or American or Canadian government. Maybe it's about Justin Trudeau. Who knows? So, great Margaret Thatcher movie, The Iron Lady.
Yes.
So we there's a little ambiguity, but we are calling it Hail to the Chiefs Week, so you get the idea of what it is. It's celebrating. The power of government to basically create
Power
and
of
to
government
destroy.
compels you.
And as always, we will look to Steve Melching to start us off with his suggestion for Monday on the 4:30 movie.
Okay, well, my pick is not a film about a president or a presidential campaign.
What?
It has nothing to do with presidents because I don't like movies about presidents.
You're not quite getting the idea this week now, are you?
I don't like those movies. My movie is about an election, an American election, however. It's a film from 1992 that is unfortunately not readily available for viewing. I think it's occasionally can be found streaming different places. It's out of print on DVD, and I don't believe it's ever been released in Blu-ray or high definition.
That's why we're showing it on the 4:30 movie.
That's right, and it is more relevant than ever. Every year it gets more relevant, and that is Bob Roberts, a film written and directed by Tim Robbins.
I had it on Laserdisc, actually.
I did as well. It's about a senatorial campaign in Pennsylvania in 1990. And it's got a great cast. It stars Tim Robbins as Bob Roberts. It has Giancarlo Esposito as an investigative reporter. It has Ray Wise, the awesome Ray Wise, as his campaign manager.
My favorite Martian.
He's great. What?
What? Wait, what? That's Ray Walston.
Oh.
That's Henry
I
Fonda.
I thought it was Henry
Nice
Fonda.
I got you, boo. Don't worry.
Ray Wise was in Twin Peaks. You know, he killed
God
Laura
damn it,
Palmer.
you're right.
Spoiler
He
alert.
And
did.
he's so
Oh,
great
whoops.
as kind of the glad-handing campaign manager of Bob Roberts.
I just want to say that I did at the Long Beach Comic Con. I moderated a panel on Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah.
And I thought the most exciting thing would be the Sherilyn Fenn was on the panel, but it actually was Ray Wise. I was like so excited to have Ray Wise on the panel. It was great. It was great.
I'm such a
He's
fan.
such a great character actor.
Me
He's
too.
like with up there like to me with like J.T. Walsh and Stephen Tobolowsky and like all these great character actors.
Was he good on the panel?
He was great,
Yeah.
and what a nice guy. It was a really,
I'm glad to
it
hear
was
that.
super fun, and I mean, it was like I had all these people from the new Twin Peaks and a bunch of people from the old Twin Peaks, and it's like they called me like a week before and said, you want to come and moderate this panel on Twin Peaks? And it's like, would I? And it's like, yeah, and it was fantastic. I really, I could have done that for hours. It was terrific.
He has one of the best qualities that I look for in actors, which is spontaneity. There's just something about him. He can switch on a dime, and that's what I love about him.
Well, and he shows that in his performance as Leland Palmer, where he goes from being sort of the nice paternal dad to this psycho-possessed lunatic. I mean, it's just the range he has, and then he was great in
when he played a
Reaper too.
Martian.
Yeah, and when he played him, and
That was
wasn't
a-
he like in Starfleet Academy, like
Yeah,
a groundskeeper?
And when he directed The Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Well, he's so charismatic on screen too. He just holds the screen anytime he's on. You just want.
You heard what Casey said. He was on Star Trek,
Yeah.
and I mentioned
Yeah.
that on Twitter. I said, "Oh, you were in one of my favorite episodes of Next Generation. Who watches the Watchers? The one they thought
yes.
Picard was God." And I said, "Obviously, they made a mistake because we all know William Shatner is God, not Picard." But anyway,
One of my college friends was in that episode as well as a stuntman. Anyway,
By the way, Ray Walston was
Walston?
in Walston. Thank you. Was in Star Trek: The Next Generation. He played Boothby.
oh, that's right.
Yes, we know.
Okay, so back to
not only that, but you know who else was Canadian? Bill Shatner,
He was also
You know
in Star
what?
Trek.
I knew that.
because you both went to McGill.
We did both go to McGill. We have a William Shatner building. Although
man.
Does it get bigger every year?
Oh, hey-o.
Watch it.
Hey,
roof is
hey,
fake.
Well, I'll tell you, if they ever do a remake of Back to School, I'm going to the William Shatner
Shatner.
building at McGill University.
Okay, so Bob Roberts. Ray Wise is the campaign manager. Alan Rickman is in it as a sort of
An English guy?
shady, An English guy. No, he's a former CIA operative who's involved with some shady dealings regarding a charity that Bob Roberts runs. Gore Vidal plays Bob Roberts' opponent, Brickley Paste, in the election. John Cusack is in it as the star of a Saturday Night Live type satire show that he goes on. Jack Black, very young Jack Black, is in it as a young fan of Bob Roberts. And then a number of stars play various TV anchors, including Peter Gallagher, Susan Sarandon, James Spader, Fred Ward, and Helen Hunt. So Bob Roberts as a character is a guy who went to military school, made it big as a businessman on Wall Street, and then became an entertainer. Let me stop me if this sounds familiar. He holds large rallies in which he plays his music, these folk songs with titles like "Drugs Stink," "This Land Was Made for Me," "Complain," "Wall Street Rap," "The Times Are Changing Back," "I'm a Bleeding Heart." All these great conservative things, and he brands himself as a conservative rebel. And I when I rewatched this movie recently, it's like that is exactly how Trump branded himself, the conservative rebel. He complains about the lying press. He hosts a beauty pageant. He's got this big estate. He appears on this Saturday Night Live show. He's got a personal doctor vouching for his health. I mean, it's a truly prescient film, and it's a great satire of the election process, or maybe less a satire and more of a warning of what's to come, or exposing sort of the worst aspects of our democracy with conspiratorial thinking and the dirty underside of elections, and I just think it's a really entertaining movie as well. We can't talk about spoilers in this show. He becomes, as the race tightens and scandals start to erupt around him, they fake an assassination attempt on him in order to rally his supporters. So I think it's a really terrific film. It's not easy to see, but I would encourage people to seek it out if they have not seen it.
Yeah, good suggestion. Deep cut.
Not a president, a senator.
That's okay. It's in the general, and senators have gone on to become presidents.
And
so,
Bob Roberts would no doubt, if they made a sequel to it, he would no doubt be president. In the
So there
sequel.
you go. Daren Dochterman, Tuesday.
Yes, Mark. Tuesday. My selection is from 1993, and it is Ivan Reitman's Dave.
I smell trouble.
It's
a Canadian, no wonder. Ivan
see
Reitman.
now. There you go. It's a heck of a
We
fun.
don't pre-plan this show, by the way. We don't know what anyone else is going to pick.
Yeah.
And apparently Casey was going to apparently pick Dave.
Don't worry, I have about 12. So
I'm
if you
sorry.
need one, I can.
I read your mind, and I'm sorry for that. It's kind of like The Prince and the Pauper, actually, in a weird way.
Yes.
It's an out of luck actor who looks exactly like the current president, is brought in to basically replace the president because the president has taken ill. And he gets so good at representing the president at functions, he kind of becomes the president as the president actually passes away. And he has to fool not only the staff, but the president's first lady. And it is a very sweet movie, and it has some really nice moments in it, and some lovely acting by Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. And it just is a very nice sort of glimpse into what it might be like to live in the White House. And
Casey, did you want to add anything to that? Since I get the impression that you may have had that on your mind as well.
So much. No, actually, so I rewatched it recently, and there was something about seeing him play the president, but also seeing him as the imposter, the lookalike, and his mannerisms and how he changed his
his whole stature.
Yeah. His physicality is the word. Everything about it. Obviously he's trying to, but you see it, and you see how he's pretending he's an actor, so he's preparing, and just everything about it is so comedic.
Yeah.
But then also about that film and how I feel like the moral of the story is to get involved in politics, and at any level, and that each one of us has a certain skills that can translate to politics.
Like Liam Neeson.
Exactly. That's exactly a particular set of skills. So I mean, say as producers, producers know how to manage people. They know how to hire people, give people jobs. Writers know how to. You could write a bill. There's a lot of skills that we all possess. Even a car mechanic, knows how to purchase and how to find good deals, and there's a lot of skills that each of us have that we could go into politics. So I feel like this moral of the story is this guy who finds jobs for people,
Right.
Temp jobs. He, as president, he realizes he could do this for the country.
Right. One of my favorite scenes in it is in the Oval Office, or one of the side offices, with Charles Grodin, his accountant. He basically calls him in to talk about the budget, and they go over the budget, and he says, "Are you hungry? Wait, how about some sausage with that hot mustard?" And he just calls up and says, "Hey, can we have a couple of sausage sandwiches with hot mustard?" And Charles Grodin's going, "You can do that?"
I mean, it really is
It's
part
just
of
such a sweet little Sweet little scenes.
It's a long tradition of the everyman or the every person
Right.
who is elevated, because there is such the trope of the career politician being evil, and that someone who comes with idealism and a freshness, can clean up Washington. It's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. I mean, it's an old trope. It's done very well in Dave. There was a movie that came about the same time that I prefer to Dave, which is American President, which inspired The West Wing, Aaron Sorkin's film, which I think is a better movie. But I do like Dave a lot.
Actually, I love Dave. I think use the word lovely, and I think that's a great word. That'll be the word for this podcast.
Sumptuous.
But no, it's very funny. It's very light on his feet. He is excellent, and it reminds me. This is going to sound bananas, but. It reminds me of kind of the unholy offspring of Tootsie and Being There.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm glad you get that. I mean, it's like, because it is sort of that assumed identity. The tension of it is like when he gets caught, like
Right.
he forms these connections, he becomes this person, but what does that mean? And then with Being There, it's just, the sort of the wisdom of simplicity. Which kind of carries through Being There in a big way, and certainly is in place in Dave. I mean, times perhaps a little too simple.
But it also has great lyrics to Hail to the Chief.
Hail
when,
to the
he-
Chief,
when he's singing
the
in the
one-
shower. Hail to the Chief, he's the one we also hail to.
Yep.
We all say hail because he keeps himself so clean. It's just hilarious.
Yes.
No, it's
Isn't there a storyline where he's estranged from the first lady?
The
The
president.
real
Oh.
president is estranged from the first lady, and
She walks in on him in the shower.
yeah.
Which always raised questions in my brain. Is he circumcised?
See,
that's
That
what
question
you.
I
never
never
occurred.
thought
Never,
that.
never
Which I think
hit me.
Well, because you're looking at their reactions and going, "Oh God."
Well,
Right.
it tells you a lot about the relationship now, doesn't it? Because she sees him
But-
in the shower and doesn't go, "Oh yeah, she's definitely not like the coach in Porky's." Who's like, "I recognize that." It's like she doesn't apparently recognize him at all. Not really. I mean, what was her marriage like?
it wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good.
It's so funny. It's like with Dave, it's like I definitely prefer American President. It's like with Bob Roberts, I prefer Face in the Crowd. You like Kazan's movie with Andy Griffith, which is a similar sort of rise to power.
Face in the Crowd is a masterpiece,
Yeah.
and I hope we'll talk more about it. I love Face in the Crowd. Bob Roberts, I think Face in the Crowd's been getting a lot of press lately because it's very similar to a lot of modern stories.
Yeah,
that
but
we've
the
been
difference
seeing,
is in Face of the Crowd, Andy Griffith going on a hot mic and basically saying he'd shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue, brings him down.
Right.
Whereas
It makes it more popular.
But anyway, that's a story for another podcast. Ashley, we got Dave, we got Bob Roberts in the mix. I'm going to come to Casey next, but what do you think
So
for Wednesday?
the movie that I'm going to propose for Wednesday is a film about a veteran. He is a cynic about politics, about government, about civic virtue. And he is thrust into a situation where his very particular set of skills must be brought into play in the service of the President of the United States and indeed the country. And he goes from being a person who has become insular and keeps everyone at bay to someone who recognizes that there is value and connection with the community and understands that there isn't necessarily an inherent link between government and civic mindedness, that somehow community can rise above like those sort of very constitutional considerations. And I am speaking, of course, of Escape from New York. God. In Escape from New York, the President of the United States faces down the Duke of New York, number one. And Kurt Russell plays Snake, call him Pliskin, call him Snake, who is recruited by the great Lee Van Mother Cleef to go into New York City, which has become a maximum security prison, and extract the president who has crashed deep inside the city and get him out in time with a recording that's supposed to be played at the UN. God knows where they are now.
Des Moines.
In Des Moines to prevent World War III. And the thing that's amazing about Escape from New York is that, you could make that movie today, call it Escape from New York, and everybody would think it would be about negative net migration from New York City. But it's not that. Weirdly, Escape from L.A., the sequel to Escape from New York, also sort of kind of fits the theme. Also could be a movie about negative net migration from Los Angeles. But it's a great action film. It is actually a great movie about service to your country. And about the relationship of the president to the people, to the point where the ending of
Mr. Miller, I'm going to have to ask you to come to the point pretty soon.
Okay, so the point is this. At the end of Escape from New York, after a lot of people, including our beloved Ernest Borgnine, dies.
It's a sign of a good movie.
Trying to get
Ernest Borgnine.
they love Ernest Borgnine. Trying to get Donald Pleasance as the president of the United States out of New York with this recording. The president is shaving, he's cleaning up to kind of go on TV and play like this recording that's going to save the world. And Snake, walks up to him and says, Mr. President, I just have a question for you. Oh, certainly, Snake. Of course. But, we have to make it quick. I have to do this. And he's like, yeah, so a lot of people died trying to get you out of there. I just wondered what your feelings are about that. And Donald Pleasance says, oh, well, the country certainly appreciates their sacrifice. And Kurt Russell says, well, okay. And he just kind of wanders off. And when the president puts the tape in that somehow is going to save the world, it plays the theme from American Bandstand. And he realizes that he gave Snake Plissken the wrong answer about the relationship between the president and the people of the country. I think that Escape from New York is probably one of the great up with people movies about presidents of our lifetime. And I cannot imagine a Hail to the Chiefs week without a movie like Escape from New York.
Well,
Can we impeach Wednesday?
So far, it's I would say that, look, you can say there's a movie like Dave called The American President that I like better than Dave. Or you can say, I like Faces in the Crowd. I almost said Paths of Glory. Better than Bob Roberts. But you can't look at me and say, you know what, Escape from New York is great, but I like Escape from L.A. better.
You're absolutely right. I
So
cannot say that.
there is nothing like it. It stands apart. Escape from New York.
That we can come back and discuss it, but I mean it's legitimate. It actually has the president in it.
He's a character.
He's a character. He's he sort of betrayed the goodwill of. We see the average person in New York just struggling to get by, come together for the common good.
All right, Mr. Miller, we'll allow it.
And it has that great John Carpenter theme.
Absolutely.
Boom, 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 boom. That one note that he keeps playing over and over again. Casey, have you had a chance to think about Thursday?
Oh, yeah, I already had a backup. Oh, yeah. I just didn't memorize everyone who was in it or anything. Right. But, yes, so Thursday, very important day. I grew up in the 90s, and it was all about corrupt presidents.
Really?
Gee, yeah.
What
Did you miss the 90s?
In the 90s?
Well,
Other
I think
than
it
Bush.
was probably due to people growing up in the 70s and seeing the Nixon administration and being inspired by that. And so for me, I think Thursday, I want to suggest My Fellow Americans with Jack Lemmon and James Garner.
My God,
yeah,
guys.
you know what? And in that movie, we of course have more Hail to the Chief songs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's actually a great choice because there are more presidents pound for pound in that movie. They're all ex-presidents.
There's like
In
four.
that case.
There's like 4 presidents in that movie.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah. I'd like to see you outdo that.
On a pound for pound basis.
Hold my beer and watch this.
Wow.
But I mean,
I got to tell you, that was even on my long list.
well,
That's great.
It's a fun buddy comedy, and I guess I was really, I know a lot about JFK, because I played Jackie Kennedy a few times, and I sort of know everything that sort of happened over the course of those 5 days in November from the assassination to the funeral. And so you would think that I would choose a JFK movie, but
No, I want to go with the dumb comedy from the 90s.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking, you know? And so, yeah, no, I watched it recently, and I just found that having those two very opposite presidents, one is a Republican, one's a Democrat, one is, of course, embroiled in a adulterous scandal. No, well, yeah. I'm sorry for being so confused. Obviously, this is my backup. So they hate each other, and the third president, who is now in power, is trying to pin some scandal on one of them. And when they find out about it, and people start dying, and they actually themselves evade getting killed. Their helicopter blows up. They're stuck in the middle of nowhere trying to figure out how to clear themselves and make sure that they don't die in the process. It has a lot of really fun actors in it. I mean, we were talking about Twin Peaks earlier. Actually, not Twin Peaks. I should say from Dune.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Stilgar.
Everett McGill.
Everett McGill was also in
Everett
Twin Peaks.
McGill
though.
was in it. Yeah.
Big Ed Hurley.
Oh yeah.
Ed Hurley's also in License to Kill.
And also, interestingly, I found out today that one of the actors in My Fellow Americans, his name's Jeff Yeager,
Was in V.
was in V.
Yeah.
But even more interesting to me is that he was in an episode of The Twilight Zone, the new Twilight Zone, where he played Elvis Presley.
Yeah, he had
So
a
if you remember
vaguely
that
Elvis
episode.
look.
Yeah.
Almost as much as James Cawley, but not quite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, this movie also has Dan Aykroyd as the current president, and John Hurd, who plays an idiot. So a lot of great, fun little things that they get to see the people of the country when they're lost in the middle of nowhere, trying to get to Ohio, to the presidential library, so they can find some proof that they're innocent. But yeah, no, it's just a fun little ride, And I guess like Dave, I was along that edge of like just enjoying a buddy comedy.
Oh my God, my daughter won the presidency. This is unbelievable timing. I just got a text from school. My daughter was in the election for senior class president, for sixth grade president, and she won the election.
Wow.
That's amazing
Hail to the
timing.
chieftain.
I just got a text. I've been waiting for this text. It says, we are proud of every candidate that ran. You were classy and determined. Never give up. You represent our school in the best way possible.
Never surrender.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Congratulations, President Altman.
And you know where that's right. You know where she learned everything from?
Independence Day.
No, the Brady Bunch. When Jan was running, she learned what not to do when she saw how Jan messed up running for the presidency in the Brady Bunch.
Well, I'm glad she
Brilliant.
didn't learn by watching Election.
Right? Oh my
Oh,
God.
well, it's funny because that was on my list, and
It's on my list too.
and
It's
I'm
a great
shocked that
film.
nobody has brought it up. But
Mark, I have a question for you.
yes,
So, what movie, kind of like My Fellow Americans, do you like better than My Fellow Americans?
well, Ashley, I'm glad you asked because we've come to Friday,
Oh boy.
and I'd like to start. You may want to go get some dessert. Some dinner, because I got quite a list here that we need to talk about.
Oh, my goodness.
Because I am appalled by these suggestions.
Oh,
Absolutely appalled.
Bob Roberts is brilliant.
Escape from New York, number one.
Escape from New York actually is probably the best of the suggestions so far. First of all, I'm going to take us way back, pre-code. Gabriel Over the White House, one of the most important films about the presidency. This is Walter Houston. He has a near-tragic accident, and Gabriel, the Archangel Gabriel, shows up and convinces him how to be a great president. But this is their idea of a great president at the time. He becomes this complete despot who gets rid of prohibition and basically attacks the gangsters. The gangsters attack the White House with machine guns trying to kill the president. I mean, it's crazy. It's anybody who knows the Hays Code basically limited what you could do and depict on screen because it was a way to protect the morals of America. But this was a pre-code film, and these films have the most gonzo crazy things. And Gabriel of the White House it anticipates FDR. It was made during the Hoover administration, and they said, "Oh, if only we could have somebody who wasn't a crook like Hoover." But their idea of not having is like having this complete despot, totalitarian president. It's gonzo. Okay, but that's not really what I would say. There's Air Force One, Harrison Ford, Get Off My Plane, The Parallax View.
Wait. Say that again. You sounded just like Harrison Ford.
No, I don't.
Oh.
I'm not trying to do any imitations. I'm saying, this Primary Colors, which is not a great movie, based on the book by Joe Klein, The Romana Clef, about the Clinton administration. John Travolta plays a thinly veiled version of Clinton. Not a great movie.
It's kind of fun, though.
It's fun.
It's kind of fun.
It's fun. I love Roger Donaldson's 13 Days about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bruce Greenwood plays one of the many actors to play John F. Kennedy. Speaking of JFK, my truly favorite conspiracy, one of the best movies of the 90s. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't buy any of the bunk that this movie is disseminating. But I love it. Is JFK, which is just a brilliant
filmmaking
movie by Oliver Stone.
It's the shortest 3-hour movie you'll ever watch.
Right.
It is absolute the filmmaking on display in that. I remember seeing it in 1991, I believe it came out, and it was just absolutely tremendous.
The form is flawless. The content is silly.
Yeah,
Yes.
the mixing of media,
so
the
good.
editing, the music.
And the impact that it made at the time when it debuted. I think I went because there was a Star Trek 6 trailer on it or something. But it's a remarkable movie, brilliant, ridiculous. But that 10-minute scene between Donald Sutherland as Mr. X and Kevin Costner as who's investigating the JFK. It's just great, and another John Williams score that's terrific. And then Oliver Stone did another movie which is not as beloved, which I also love, with another great John Williams score, Nixon, which is even a little more crazy, but is a terrific movie.
The best piece of music from the Nixon score isn't in the film; it's used for the trailer.
For the trailer, which
was a tremendous piece of music.
Yeah, really great. Obviously 7 Days in May, another great conspiracy theory film by John Frankenheimer about a plot, by rogue generals to depose the president, and Kirk Douglas is the only thing that stands in the way between Burt Lancaster and the president played by Frederick March, which I love that. Dr. Strangelove doesn't get any better than this, but maybe it's post-apocalyptic week. Maybe that's better than for President Week. You talked about election. Clearly, that is one of the great films about an election, recently released on Criterion. But now I get down to my two picks.
Your actual picks.
My actual
picks.
2 picks. Well, actually 3.
Oh my gosh!
They're and maybe Steve, you can help me with this. One is Bananas, where Woody Allen becomes president of San Marcos, a small banana republic, and with that brilliant opening with Howard Cosell narrating the assassination of the president. Okay,
Very deep.
I'm getting to what I think should be the film. I'm warming up.
I like the Mouse Reward better.
The Mouse Reward. I like Bananas better than Mouse Reward, but anyway, we'll have to agree to disagree. The President's Analyst with James Coburn as an analyst who becomes a therapist.
The shrink to the president.
The shrink to the president, a thinly veiled JFK, and he's being chased by the CEA, which is the CIA, and the FBR, because they were afraid to say CIA and FBI. And the villain of the movie is the
TPC.
The telephone company.
Telephone company.
And basically everyone's worried about what James Coburn does or doesn't know, and it becomes this totally mod gonzo chase film.
It's madcap.
It's madcap. It's a madcap movie, and that's a great description of it. Madcap being today's word for this podcast.
Look it up, kids.
Let's we got some time. Let's not just race through this one.
Right.
A lot of people are probably may not
I'm
have
not.
even heard of this movie.
I've heard of it. I just haven't ever
The President's Analyst. It's not readily available, I don't think. I have it on DVD.
It's on streaming now. You can the high def version. It has never been released on Blu-ray, but you can download it for on iTunes or Vudu. Both have it.
It's really a surprise.
I'm surprised.
No, it's a good surprise.
Okay.
It starts out slow, but then it ramps up into this psychedelic 70s trip, basically. And it's crazy. There's no describing it. You have to see it. It's just very strange because it goes into the sort of psychedelic world of the late 60s, and it takes you on a surrealistic trip, basically. And it's intrigue, and it's politics, and it's strange goings-on in the government. And
It's like a go-go spy movie.
Yeah.
It's got a Lalo Schifrin score.
yeah, it's extremely odd. And if
William Daniels is in it, for crying out loud.
Yes.
it would never be made today, ever.
No, that is for sure.
It's definitely a very entertaining 60s film that's worth seeking out if you have the means. It is so choice.
Even the way it got made. He had just done the very successful In Like Flint and Our Man Flint for Fox, and he had his own production company. And this guy Ted Flicker, who'd never directed a movie, had this, and Paramount agreed to bankroll it with Flicker directing, and it wouldn't have happened without sort of James Coburn really going to bat for this. And it was a different kind of role for him, and he's so good in it. You know.
He is the constant, steady figure walking through this whole thing as these events swirl around him, and it's really fascinating.
It's interesting. I see Will Geer is an actor in the film, and he founded Theatricum Botanicum, which is a Shakespeare theater here in Los Angeles. So that's pretty exciting to me. I'd watch this.
You should. It's really fun. And while we're doing fun facts about the President's Animals, also Severin Darden is in it from This Way to Eden, and Godfrey Cambridge, who's great in it.
Right.
It's a really fun film. And if anything, any of the takeaways from this episode of the 4:30 movie, this is a movie that probably most people listening have not seen, and I would
think
strongly
this actually
recommend.
did show on the 4:30 movie.
It might have. It might have. I didn't see it until many years later. But my pick, largely because it has the word president in it, is
The American President.
Did you just Google president movies?
No, I have my notes right here. I could have done this off the top of my head, by the way. No, actually, you know what? I'll tell you what I Googled. I Googled to see if in Face in the Crowd he was actually running for Senate or if it was.
I think it was Senate, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that was what I was Googling. But I very rarely resort to crude shenanigans of
Mark,
looking at IMDb.
Since that movie isn't your pick, should we talk about that for a couple minutes?
Yeah, because, and then I will announce my pick because I'm firmly committed to my pick for Friday.
What's your pick?
Okay, do your pick then.
Okay.
Or then
what's your pick?
Because I have another one
Yeah,
as well.
because we can. This is what we should do. Let me make my pick for Friday, and then if we want to replace any of these, which might be a good idea, just saying. Okay, my pick for Friday is Alan Pakula's legendary movie All the President's Men with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman.
Henry Ford.
And, Pakula is another guy like Franklin Schaffner who never got the respect he did. He died young in a car accident in New York, but he made films like Sophie's Choice, Presumed Innocent, Clute, Parallax View, another great conspiracy thriller about a senatorial candidate who, I'm a big fan of Pakula, but he's never made a better movie than All the President's Men. It's brilliantly made. It's about a very important time in American history. It is a detective story. It is a conspiracy thriller. And I think, for people who didn't live through the whole Watergate and Nixon era, it really captures, and I was extremely young at the time, but it captures the feeling of that era. And it really is an example when people say they don't make movies like that anymore, like they did in the 70s. It's that virtuoso 70s movie making, adult, smart, brilliantly acted. And because you go down the line, it's not just Redford and Hoffman who are great in that movie. You have Will Decker, Stephen Collins, who's really good, at Hal Holbrook, who's terrific, and Jason Robards, who is absolutely amazing as Ben Bradley, as the editor of the Washington Post. So I just can't say enough good things. And of course, I think it's very relevant to today. The power of the press. There are certain parts of our society that have demeaned and diminished the role of a free press and democracy. There's nothing more important. And I think that All the President's Men pays homage to the importance of a free press, and and I can't.
Well, back when the press wasn't looking for clicks.
There's something to be said for that, but there's a difference between the print media, the old gray lady, the New York Times and the Washington Post, and these August magazine and the Atlantic and things like that, and New Yorker, than there are for the websites. So while that is true, I think of digital media, to diminish the work that's being done in the print media would be unfair, because these people are really preserving and our democracy, and there's a lot of shit to dig through, and they're keeping us afloat barely. So
plus, this is back from the time when scandals were simple.
Yes, yes,
when it was black and white, relatively.
And this is a much more deliberative process. I mean, these are journalists chronicling the story of these journalists who are digging and trying to find the facts and corroboration, and it's a very deliberative process. It's not throwing out the news onto the web or onto Twitter or something, like the first draft of history or the first rough draft,
right.
rough draft of history.
It's the vomit draft.
Yeah,
of
the
history.
vomit draft of history.
Right.
They're actually trying to put together the pieces of this story, and it's for a film. It sounds like it would be a very dry topic. It's a film about reporters, but they're played by two of the hottest movie stars of the time. And it's riveting. It really is a thriller. You want them to get to the truth and to
It's
break
great.
the
It reminds you there were giants in those days.
when you can take a true life story where you know the ending and still make it suspenseful, it's an incredible achievement, because that movie is a nail biter, no matter how many times you've seen it, and how much Nixon resigns, they find, and at the time when people said they're adapting, Robert Redford wanted to adapt this, the Woodward's book, everyone's like, why? How? Who cares? And yet it is, all that aside, take the politics out of it, take, the true life. It's a great movie, period.
Yeah.
Well,
unlike
that.
Not quite as good as.
No, you know what? I considered this movie, but
She didn't like it, so screw you.
well, no, I know that we're fantasy programming this. The 4:30 movie.
We're not necessarily trying to find the 5 best movies about a topic. We're more interesting.
But the reason I chose to ignore it was due to the current political atmosphere of the Me Too movement and Dustin Hoffman. So I didn't want to put my money. I didn't want to give him fantasy residuals. By suggesting
most film deals, your residuals are basically fantasy.
Is that the truth?
So I would veto that one.
Well, here's the other argument for my fellow Americans, which is, God damn it, these theme weeks, yes, they should have dramas. They should move us. They should make us think. But at the same time, it should be fun.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It should be fun. It should be different. And that's what I think is great about that choice.
Movies can do many things, and one of them is provide escapism and entertainment, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and we shouldn't diminish a film because it's a comedy. I think that's lazy. It's too often, people fall into the trap of dismissing a film as unimportant if it's a comedy or a genre film, a horror film, or a science fiction film, and I think that's unfair.
And I have a little. It's a very short list, but I have a little list of my own movies
from LA,
about.
from Cleveland.
I first, I have a movie that I think is quite good. It's a movie about ex-presidents, and it's really about the intersection of law enforcement and surfing.
Oh my God!
Yes.
No!
Oh my
It's called Point Break.
Yes.
It's,
The whole point of this week.
it's pretty much the greatest
Mr.
movie
Miller, I'm going to have to
Pretty
ask
much.
you to leave.
And if you don't like that one, well, JFK.
A gentleman is not recognized.
JFK is not the only movie about JFK.
The lady recognizes the gentleman.
Thank you. JFK is not the only movie about JFK and conspiracies and mysteries involving John Fitzgerald Kennedy. There's another film by a director named Don Coscarelli.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, my God. You're just not taking this in the spirit in which it was intended.
It's called Bubba Hotep.
Oh my gosh!
And it's quite brilliant. In a retirement home, we discover that JFK is still alive, and he teams up with Elvis Presley to battle a mummy. And it is absolutely fantastic. I think it's one of the most important meditations
Next week,
on
the role of Ashley Miller will be played by Casey McKinnon.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I think Ashley Edward Miller, you are my heart.
Thank you.
Because the real movie that I wanted to propose this week was Mars Attacks.
I was.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good. Let's talk about that
Jack
one.
Nicholson as the president is just amazing.
I think you're
and
right.
I feel like seeing that at a young, impressionable age just changed my perspective of what a president and what politics is in general. I just saw through the corruption as I was growing up. I just knew.
I agree.
Yeah.
God, I'm horrified by all this.
You shouldn't be horrified. You should be celebrating it. It's telling the same stories, but just in fantastical ways. In ways that I think are, they're accessible. They're digestible. They're fun. Occasionally kind of
Digestible.
stupid. But in a wonderful way. I mean, come on. What would you rather watch? Would you rather watch Point Break or The American President?
The American President.
Point Break.
I would rather watch The American President.
And there's nothing wrong with The American President, by the way. I dig it.
I would like to say,
Point Break is definitely Tuesday.
when we do Surfing Week. But I would like to, also we didn't talk. We were talking about Solo at lunch, and we were talking about Ron Howard as the director, and he did a low key but wonderful adaptation of the play Frost Nixon, which I think is one of his best movies, and that was Michael. Not Michael Shannon, Michael
Sheen.
Michael Sheen.
Michael Shannon.
And
Frank
who played
Frank
Frank
Langella.
Langella.
Who was also in Dave.
Yeah, and I like Dave. Don't get me wrong.
And Dracula.
But I think Frost
Oh, yeah.
with a great
And
John
Star
Williams
Trek
curtain.
Deep Space Nine.
Well,
Masters of the
don't let him
Universe.
start Star Trek. He'll start saying, "Oh, well, what about the Savage Curtain? Lincoln was in that."
Yes, actually he was.
Well, we
Help
didn't mention
me.
Lincoln, by the way, the Steven
Spock.
Spielberg.
Oh,
film,
isn't that
Lincoln.
interesting?
But
Isn't
let's
that
back up for a
interesting?
second.
Or
say?
Jefferson in Love.
We mentioned a movie called
Or
A Face
Paris.
in the Crowd.
Yes.
Which
Oh,
is
you're right.
a
God
movie
damn it.
that
It's been a long
gosh,
day.
what year was that? 60.
3?
But it stars Andy Griffith, and this is a movie I hadn't heard of until about 15 years ago, and it's incredible. It's about this sort of ne'er-do-well con artist, basically, who's a singer who attracts the attention of a young reporter in a small town, and ends up rising to great heights in government, becomes this populist hero, and rides this wave of popular support into Congress. And it is a really dramatic Andy Griffith. Most people think of him as Sheriff Andy Taylor, but or Matlock. And he is a vicious bastard in this movie. He can turn on the charm, but when he's on camera or on the radio, but
He's a total phony, and he looks down on his, sycophantic followers. He's
a
nothing
womanizer.
but contempt for them, and it's
he's an
very
awful
relevant.
human being, and he's continually rewarded for this behavior in the film until, spoiler alert, he's captured on a hot mic, revealing his true nature, and falls from grace as a result of that. Something that is maybe a fantasy now, but
A lot of people say, On the Waterfront is Kazan's greatest movie. I think A Face in the Crowd is Kazan's greatest movie. I just think it's really magnificent. And again, it's a movie that has become more relevant as time goes on. Can I give you a counterpoint for Bob Roberts? Something in a similar vein?
Bananas.
I have a feeling you're going to want to stick with Bob Roberts, but I'm going to throw this out to you to see if you want to make a switch.
well, I wonder if it's the same one I'm thinking of.
Is it The Candidate with
No.
Robert Redford?
Although that is a good film.
Because The Candidate, of course, is about a man who's running for office, and he does, basically he's handpicked because he's handsome, but it's not like he comes to it with a lot of ideas, and and ultimately becomes wrapped up in the election. He does whatever he can to win. And at the end, when he's elected, it's a result to its own end. So the last line of the movie is Michael Ritchie as the satire, but at the last line of the movie is Robert Redford looks and he basically says, "What now?" It's like the whole idea was to win the election, but once you win the election, it's like, what now? And it's a very powerful satire. And again, Michael Ritchie, another sort of director who doesn't quite get the love that he deserves, who's done some really great work over the years. And I'm a big fan of The Candidate. I'm actually surprised it took me this long to mention it, but it reminds me in a lot of ways of Bob Roberts as well, but probably better known.
I was going to suggest another film from that time, from the 90s, called Bulworth, a Warren Beatty film where he plays a senator running for re-election and just starts telling the truth one day. He just stops all the bullshit and becomes incredibly, becomes this populist hero as a result of it. I haven't seen this film in years. I don't know how. I have it on DVD. I don't know how available it is, but I remember it being a pretty terrific political satire of the time. I am not prepared to talk about it in depth.
You are not prepared.
It was a film that I really enjoyed at the time.
It's good. It got a lot of attention. It really resonated in pop culture because they would talk about people being like the Bulworth candidate and stuff.
He started rapping. I mean, it's crazy. And Beatty directed the film, co-wrote it, and stars in it. Warren Beatty.
Yeah, Beatty hasn't done a ton of great things since Bulworth. Obviously he's a very methodical guy who, like Kubrick, does a movie once in a blue moon. But, he had done a couple. I love Bugsy, and I think, Bulworth is quite good. But, I don't know.
Well,
we seem to have an embarrassment of riches here.
Recently, didn't he do a movie about Howard Hughes that was a big collapse?
Rules Don't Apply, which was a disaster. Financially and
well, it was no Dick Tracy.
And he did that Gary Shandling movie, didn't he, a while back?
I would like to revise my vote for Superhero Week. I think there's merit in
We're
Dick
not
Tracy.
in Superhero Week anymore.
But yeah, so I guess what we're looking at, subject to anyone wanting to revise what they said, Monday is Bob Roberts, Tuesday is Dave, Wednesday Escape from New York. Thursday, I'm choking as I say this, My Fellow Americans, and then capping the week with All the President's Men. Does anybody, based on any of the conversations we had, want to swap out one of their films? Anyone? Bueller?
I think we're all set in our ways. I think we're good.
The ayes have it.
Behold, President's
Week. Well, come on, we're Superman 2, one of the great presidents, E.G. Marshall.
Hey, if we hadn't talked like crazy about that during Superhero Week, I would have been all over that this week.
Well, it's funny because that actually is a great scene in that movie where no president,
no one who rules over so many would kneel so quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Where's the real president? And then E.G.
right.
Marshall comes out.
Yeah.
And
it's a great scene.
And then starts the CBS Radio Mystery Theater.
Oh my God, there is a reference that's going to go over 99% of the audience.
I don't care.
I love it though. It's really funny. God, there's so many movies that we didn't even talk about Manchurian Candidate.
That's true.
So,
and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Oh my goodness!
It did vaguely. It did have a cameo.
Yeah.
It had a cameo. We suck for not talking about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We just did a Hail to the Chief.
Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we just did Independence Day on Alien.
Well, I know we
Invasion
did,
Week,
but
so.
still, that's definitely
one of the
a movie
great
with
presidential speeches, in that as well. So, but I think it's Election Day. We hope that whoever you're voting for, that you'll go out and execute. Take advantage. Die.
No, don't execute. No.
We hope you'll go out and take advantage of your
constitutionally
do your civic duty. People have sacrificed so much to get you the right to vote. Whether it's our veterans or women getting the suffragettes getting women the right to vote. So there's an obligation you have to go and be educated about the issues and vote however you ultimately choose to vote. I could tell you how I think you should, but you should go and do your civic duty. And this was Hail to the Chiefs Week. Not
Chiefs.
The football
Home
team
Chiefs.
on Chives. That's about great butlers. Alec Guinness and Murder by Death on Hail to the Chiefs Week.
Benson
I want to remind you that Lore is currently available for streaming on Amazon. The Disney Channel is airing Star Wars Resistance. And, of course, you can check out Daren Dochterman's fantastic 430 movie swag at 430movie.com. And you can also follow us socially at 430 movie podcast. And if you want to learn more about Casey McKinnon or ask why she's so fascinated by dumb Jack Lemmon comedies.
Nice.
Hey.
Now. Casey is can be reached at Casey McKinnon at Casey McKinnon, and we hope you'll join us again. Now that you've had your baptism by fire, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you.
At Steven Melching, at Daren Doch, and of course at Ashmaster0. So, and you can find me at Mark A. Altman on Instagram and Twitter. We'd like to thank our friends here at Electric Entertainment for the use of the room. And, of course, Bill Ritter, our fantastic engineer and #1 supporter here at the 430 Movie. And please go on iTunes where you can rate us 5 stars for entertaining you for this last hour. And if we weren't entertained, well, maybe don't go to Apple Podcasts. But
If you hit anything other than 5 stars, it will blow up your house. So don't do that. Just hit the 5.
what Ashley said. Again, this was Hail to the Chiefs Week on 430 Movie. We'll see you next week for an all-new theme week. Very special thanks to Casey McKinnon for joining us. And thank you for joining us for the 430 Movie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Hail to the chief. If
Dun,
you
dun,
don't,
dun,
I'm
dun,
gonna
dun,
kill
dun,
you.
dun, 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 dun.